While I have you briefly, I did hear from Ms. Wang that she's running a few minutes late, but she should be here soon.
This is the April 20th, 2023 Zoning Board of Adjustment regular meeting. My name is Matt Perry, and I'm chair of the board. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of quorum.
Board members Johannesson and Sminkarova will be absent this evening. Board member Callahan. Here. Grants Korsch.
Here.
Hutchins.
Here.
Ingram.
Here.
Chair Perry.
Here.
Vice Chair Softly.
Aye.
And Board member Wang. So we have 6 members present.
Okay, let the record show that we do have quorum, and with that, we'll proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, available at LIMS, that's LIMS, .minneapolismn.gov. Is there a motion to approve this agenda?
So moved.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? And with that, the agenda is approved. I believe all the board members have seen a copy of the minutes from the March 16th, 2023 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Let's see, I think Mr. Hutchins got that. So is there a second? All right, it's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. All against indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? If you weren't here last time, please abstain.
Abstain.
And that motion passes. The minutes from the Zoning Board of Adjustment March 16th, 2023 meeting are approved. Mr. Ellis, are there any petitions or communications?
Hello, Chair Perry, members of the board. I have one communication this evening. It is the result of an appeal of the decision of the Board of Adjustment at 223 40th Street East. The applicant, then appellant, appealed the fence height in the required front yard. That appeal was denied by the Business Inspection, Housing and Zoning Committee, and that's the outcome.
So there were a couple of things that we denied, right?
Correct. Chair Perry, members of the board, only the fence height was appealed.
Okay.
The appellant decided, applicant/appellant decided to make some modifications to the retaining wall and some of the other things, and still was granted the variance for the impervious surface, so that still applies. On only appealed the fence height variance, was proposing to pull it back a little bit, but still not in compliance with zoning regulations, so.
Okay, thanks. Any questions of Mr. Ellis? I see none. Thank you very much. A reminder to applicants and others, if you're going to speak at the public hearing, please sign in on the sheet outside the door and speak clearly into the microphone. If you've not signed in, you can do so on your way out. Also to applicants and others, please contact staff after the hearing with any questions regarding your projects, and if you could turn your cell phones off or turn them on silent, that would be appreciated. Let's review the agenda. I'll read the agenda number and the address of the project and state whether it's slated for consent, continuance, withdrawal, return, or discussion. And we have one item on the agenda, and it's a discussion item, so I'll just talk about what those are. These are items for which the board will take public testimony, deliberate on, and make a decision. After the public testimony has been heard for each particular discussion item, I will close the public hearing for that agenda item. Once I close the public hearing for an item, no additional public testimony will be taken, but staff may be asked to address board questions. After the public hearing for an item is closed, board members will then discuss and act on motions, and the chair only votes in the case of a tie. So our one agenda item is agenda item number land use request agenda item is number 5, 2900 to 2910 Hennepin Avenue. And this is a discussion item. Let the record show that Ms. Wang has joined us, and since we really haven't gotten into anything yet, she will be able to vote on this item. So there are no consent items, and we'll move right on to our first agenda item. Ms. Brandt.
Good afternoon, Chair Perry, members of the board. Agenda item number 5 is a remodel of the Uptown Theater property at 2900 to 2912 Hennepin Avenue. This property is located at the corner of Hennepin Avenue and Lagoon Avenue in the Uptown area of Minneapolis. The property is currently zoned C3A Community Activity Center with the PO Pedestrian Oriented Overlay District and a built form of Transit 10. The property is currently undergoing a remodel to establish the use as a live performance theater. It was previously in use as a movie theater and a nail salon. The property received permits for remodel in the middle of last year, and during the remodel, several windows were removed in excess of the permitted scope of the building permit. And this item on the screen right now is the approved demolition permit, and these 3 windows that are highlighted have been removed. However, they were clearly being shown as retained, and in one case even expanded on the approved construction plans. The work in excess of the permit scope was reported to the city by a member of the public and referred to zoning enforcement, who issued orders to correct. And that is the application that is before you today. The site plan review standards require that 30% of a facade facing a public street must be windows. In the pedestrian-oriented overlay district, this is increased to 40%. As completed, the work comprises 30.8% of the facade. The variance is requested in order to legalize this facade at less than 40%. Here on the screen are some photographs taken by zoning enforcement showing the windows that have been removed. These were taken in December of 2022. There's another angle, and then one more, a little zoomed out a little bit. With regards to the variance findings, staff finds that there are no practical difficulties in complying with the ordinance. The building was originally constructed in 1918 with nearly 100% glazing on the ground floor. We have here a photograph of the building from its announcement at being opened back in 1918. And we can see here nearly 100% glazing on the ground floor. In the intervening years, the building has been remodeled several times, many times, but the most recent tenant did still comply with the 40% glazing. The layout and circulation of this space within the theater is a condition that was created by the applicant. The openings here, which separate the walls of the building from the performance space, are separated from that performance space by stairs, walls, and other rooms, and so the presence of windows would not affect the visibility of the stage or the ability of the space to perform its role as a performance space. Staff finds that the first finding is not met. This variance is not in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance or the comprehensive plan. The specific items in the comprehensive plan are outlined in the staff report. In the interest of time, I will not go over them in detail. However, I can if the board wishes. The increased requirement in the pedestrian-oriented overlay, again, increasing the standard requirement of 30% up to 40%, is intended to create a more welcoming pedestrian environment and to maximize eyes on the street and other SEPTED principles, which is crime prevention through environmental design. Staff finds that the second finding has not been met. The essential character of this area in the core of Uptown is itself of large showrooms and store display glass. The proposal falling below the 40% requirement in the PO does not meet the character of the area. The proposal would not be detrimental to health, safety, or welfare of those using the property or the general public. Staff finds that the third finding is met, but only in part. Because not all three findings have been met, staff recommendation is to deny this application. I will stand for questions.
Thanks for the presentation, Ms. Brandt. Are there any questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Hutchins.
Thanks, Chair Perry. Can you put the blueprint up of where the demoed highlighted windows were? Would you, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, would you indicate where the theater starts, or I should say, where the historical component or portion of the building starts and where it falls off? Would you mind drawing it on there or doing marking on there?
Thank you, Chair Perry, Board Member Hutchins. The performance space itself can be seen right here with the chairs and stage. The original, the historic Uptown Theater building was right here. You can kind of see faintly dashed
Yep.
was the interior demising wall that has been removed. And then the windows are over here. So there's.
So where's the
this
historic
was, sorry, this
portion
was the
end?
demolition plan. The next page shows the proposed floor plan, if that sounds like maybe more what you're going for.
Where's the historic portion end? Right there?
Right
Okay.
there, yep.
So then, can you circle the windows on there too, just to make sure we're all on the same page? There, and there. Okay, just making sure.
Yep.
So from there, it doesn't look like they're blocking, the entertainment space is blocked by walls. There's a large open space now. Or are we just calling that entryway wall, vestibule, essentially what we're calling blocking it?
Well, there's a Chair
So
Perry,
that's a
Board Member
staircase.
Hutchins, there's a stairwell here, and then there's an interior set of walls here.
What's that vestibule wall gonna be made out of? Is that gonna be glass walls? Or is that gonna be like,
The materials aren't called out, but it doesn't appear to mention that it doesn't indicate by the symbology that it would be glass. Looks to me just like a standard wall construction.
okay.
Ms. Grants Korsch? And if you could turn your mic on.
Just to be very clear, the area there is only a vestibule then that we're asking the glazing to be replaced.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Softly.
Thank you, Chair Perry. Thank you, Ms. Brandt. I'm curious to what extent, if at all, the zoning code and the presentation from staff considers the aspect of safety from gun crime and the impact that glass would have as opposed to a brick facade.
Chair Perry, members of the board, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. Maybe perhaps Mr. Ellis may have a better response, but this is a standard requirement in every pedestrian-oriented overlay district within the city, and I don't know that there would be particular consideration for this property.
Sure, I understand it's a tricky question and not particularly related, possibly not related to zoning in any way whatsoever.
Chair Perry, Vice Chair Softly. To answer your question, the code considers safety in a sense. One of the reasons for the regulation of windows and having windows is eyes on the street, the ability to look out. People look in to see if there's something going on or if something's going on the street where they can then react to it in some capacity. One of the things, and we've got several regulations to this. We've got the minimum 30% windows we have, although it's higher here in the pedestrian-oriented overlay district. We also do not allow people to block windows with shelving or signs or anything like that between 4 and 7 feet, so people can view in and out of structures, et cetera. So that's kind of the consideration. We want the ability of people to see in and out of buildings. So,
Okay, thank you.
Sure, Mr. Hutchins.
Thanks, Chair Barry. So with the intention of people being able to see in and out of the building, if that vestibule wall isn't glass, you'll only be seeing into an entryway, correct?
Correct.
And if that staircase is there, all you're seeing is the underside of the staircase?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? I see none. Thank you. Let's open the public hearing. The applicant is present, if you want to give your name and address for the record. And we have read your report that you provided in the staff packet. So if you just can stick to the highlights of that, that would be great.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Michael Margulies. I'm with Newton Res LLC, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant Armory Holdings LLC. Armory Holdings owns the Uptown Theater. It also owns the Armory downtown Minneapolis and has been pretty successful in helping revitalize that portion of the town. A little bit of context: when the Uptown Theater closed due to the change in the movie industry, it really had a serious impact on the neighborhood. And Armory has been trying to figure out how to revitalize this property and therefore revitalize the Uptown neighborhood, which has fallen into some tough times. And so what they've done is taken the historic property and along and leased a portion of the property next door, which is the 2910 building, in which these windows are located. The program, the architectural program, meets the underlying zoning requirement of meeting 30% glazed windows. It doesn't meet the overlay requirement of 30%. We disagree with the findings of the staff report. We think that the practical difficulty test is met. The circumstances here were not caused by the applicant. We're trying to renovate and repurpose a 100-year-old building. And it's an extension of the use that it's always been used for. Creating additional window space would make it impossible for us to use the building the way we want to use it. Letting light into the foyer area, which is also performance space, would limit the ability to stage the performance space, light the performance space, and have the audience participate in the use of the performance space. For the same reason that you wouldn't allow windows into a movie theater, you can't allow windows to be used here. For the same reason you wouldn't have, if this was a commercial darkroom, you wouldn't impose this requirement on them. The applicant didn't create these circumstances. They're just trying to use the building and work with the building in the circumstances that it gives us. And it's doing so in keeping with the underlying glazing requirement of 30%. So I think the practical difficulties test is clearly met. We also have a disagreement whether or not this meets the spirit and intent of the comprehensive plan and the ordinance. Staff report concedes it meets the comprehensive plan. What we have is a difference of emphasis on the policy. The ordinance, staff is suggesting that we look at policy number 6 as the justification for this, for its rationale. We suggest that the application of the 40% rule in this particular situation actually works against what the policy is trying to achieve. The policy wants clear windows at street level. It says they're desirable. It says it wants the policy wants to allow views so that you can see interesting things and to prevent a feeling of enclosure. But if you look at the main part of policy 6, the main part of policy 6 is to do the following. It's to foster safe streets. It's to foster successful projects. It's to encourage renovation of existing development projects. And that's exactly what we're doing here. If you apply this policy correctly, we're accomplishing the primary policy guides. So what we think we have is a little bit of a conflict of policy goals here. We think that the policy issue of whether it should be 40% versus 30% pales in comparison to the ability to convert this space and repurpose the theater and its adjacent space for venue performances, for entertainment performances. And we think that we have accomplished that, meeting the policies while still keeping the 30% requirements. Finally, I can't believe that there's any much discussion that this is detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood. Allowing 30% coverage, which is allowed in the underlying requirements, under the underlying zoning, will not impact the health, safety, or welfare of the neighborhood. What it will impact is the revitalization of the neighborhood. It will bring people back to the street, which is what this policy is designed to encourage, which in turn will make the street safer, which is what the policy is trying to do, and it will, in the end, help energize this neighborhood. I think by focusing on the 40% versus 30% for this small element here, we are losing sight of what the ordinance is really designed to achieve. So I think that in the end, the three tests for the variance are met. In the context of revitalizing this neighborhood and dealing with the practical circumstances that we're finding with the property, it just makes sense to allow this variance to achieve. I'll answer any questions.
Thanks for your testimony. Are there any questions of the applicant? Yes, Mr. Hutchins.
Thanks, Chair Perry. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks for coming down. Question for you. Why did you choose to put the staircase, the wraparound staircase, in that location against the exterior wall in the front?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
Why did you choose to put the wraparound staircase in the front of the building against that exterior wall, thus negating the use of the two windows?
I'm not sure that I have the full answer to you for that. We are constrained in terms of what the building configuration allows us to do. We have the historic structure that we can't touch. We have this space that has limited ability to reconfigure. And at the same time, we're trying to expand the viewing and the VIP space, the viewing and the lounge space and the additional performance space. So there are just so many places to put the things that are otherwise required by code that are essential, exit and fire safety and public safety type aspects.
Appreciate your answer. I got one more for you. With the amount of double doors, with the need of all that access and egress because of the type of building it is, and trying to keep the historical nature of the project, you're kind of limited to the amount of windows you can put in because there's so much door on that face. Has that limited your decision making when it comes to where the windows sit?
Yeah, I think that's an accurate statement, and I think you have to look at it in the context of this building in its connection with the historic building next door. True, they're two separate buildings, but you also have to look at the purpose of these buildings. The purpose of these buildings is a theater, and just to have glass to meet this requirement sort of is underwhelmed by the purpose of the theater, which is to allow performance space. We also have to deal with it in the context of this neighborhood. We've had temporary glass in there for the last year, and no sooner do we get it up than it comes out because of vandalism and other public safety issues. We're trying to deal with the public safety issue here, and we think that we've gotten a pretty good result here. There's plenty of glass. There's plenty of opportunity for the neighborhood to see what goes on here, and that meets the spirit of the ordinance.
Mr. Softly.
Thank you, Chair Perry. Thank you, Mr. Margulies. In a way, are you asking us to create a balancing test between the underlying zoning and the overlay zoning?
Could you ask that question again, please?
Are you asking us to create a balancing test between the underlying zoning and the overlay zoning?
What I'm asking you to do is to acknowledge that the underlying zoning provides for 30% coverage. The overlay provides for 40% coverage. If we were coming in and then the whole building and the whole project as a whole meets the 30%, as does this building, just the 2910 building. If we were coming in and asking you for a variance with less than 30%, I think that might be cause for concern. But in this case, given the other rationale, as long as we meet the 30%, we have met, I think, the substance and the goal of the ordinance and the comp plan. So I'm not asking you to balance as such. I'm saying that we've sort of met the critical threshold in doing so.
Sure, and I appreciate the answer. I have a follow-up question, if I may. To what extent do you value the glass from the street side? You've made a great argument for what you don't value about the extra glass from the project perspective in your program, but what about the street from Hennepin and the adjoining lagoon?
Is your question, what is the experience of the pedestrian?
Yeah, if I could rephrase it, what
Okay.
do you see as the distinction between the pedestrian's experience at 30% versus 40% glazing coverage?
In this case, I think it's negligible, if even measurable. What the pedestrian experience here is the commercialization of the street, and we agree that generally the overlay requirements of 40% make sense. But in certain applications, if you want a theater in this neighborhood, which I think we consider as valuable, you have to consider what the needs of that theater are. And I'm using the example of the dark room again. If you value a dark room, you have to take the dark room as you find it, which can't have windows on it. Here, the experience of the pedestrian is he or she sees everything that's going on with the entryway of the Uptown Theater, and this is part of it. Their experience is enhanced from the street side by looking at the theater, by looking at everything that's displayed on the theater, the large doors in the theater, and this area. I think on balance, the experience is sufficient for the pedestrian, and it actually enhances the street, in which again accomplishes what the purposes of the ordinance is trying to get at.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. So one thing you're talking a lot about this dark room sort of issue being the problem with the windows, and I wanted to understand from what I understand from reading the plans, it seems like you're leaving in the windows from the historic building because you can't touch it. But those windows do look into the performance area. Am I not wrong about that?
I think a little bit of context is appropriate. So consider this room to be the room that is facing Hennepin Avenue, and that the theater is there, that's Hennepin Avenue. So if we're going to have a performance in this room, and if you look behind you, you have windows. I can't have a performance here because I can't light it. I can't stage it. I can't have people looking at the performance room there if that's what it's going to be used for, because I have light streaming in, and I have too much ambient light that will destroy accesses for the venue. So it's counterproductive to the use of the property, and it doesn't achieve much in terms of accomplishing the street experience that the ordinance is trying to achieve.
Can I just follow up with that?
Yes, please.
So I think one thing I'm struggling, maybe it's helpful to bring up, I don't know, Ms. Brandt, if you can bring up the plan so we can all kind of look at it together. But from how I was looking at the plans, it seems like the windows are looking out into the performance area, and I'm not sure how the vestibule windows are impacting the additional performance area. So it seems like there are windows that are already existing in the historic space that is impacting where the seating is.
Okay. Let me see if I can try to answer the question this way. This area, in and of itself, can be used for performance, for staging, with or without a combination of the area next door. So if you look at that just separately, can we effectively use that space? And the answer is that the use is diminished because you're asking us, the code is theoretically asking us to put some transparent substance facing the street. And also to the extent that it blends in or bleeds into the viewing space of the actual seated performance area, same answer.
But you are able to use the performance area on the right-hand side with the windows that are currently there facing the street?
Well, yes, because there are no windows, at this point, there are no windows that intrude upon that space. That would not be true here. So you got to take the space as you find it, in this case even more so because it's a historic building. And that's the practical difficulty test. You're taking the building as you find it. We didn't create it that way.
So I guess just to finish following up. So my question is why that case, why you are able to use that and whether or not why you can't replicate that situation on the left-hand side where you have that other performance area where you've removed the windows.
I think the correct answer to that, and I'm not the architect, so I don't know the answer. I think the answer is we can't replicate it without compromising the use of that space, both visually and from a movement standpoint, getting people in and out.
Ms. Grants-Korsch?
I'm sorry, could you please go to the proposed plan? Because I'm still, I have to follow up on Anna's question here because I'm very, very confused.
Would you
No,
mind-
I'm asking for the proposed plan because it's very clear to me that if the interior wall was opaque and could you please put the plan up on the?
I'm
on
sorry,
the-
I'm not sure what you're asking
The
for.
proposed plan, that's the proposed plan has a vestibule. Am I not correct?
There we go.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Thank you. Pull it up no, you got to pull it up so we can see it though, please. Thank you. Okay. It just seems very clear to me that if that interior wall was all opaque, just like when you go to a theater and they have a separate vestibule area, that there's an opaque wall that prevents light from coming into the performance space. And in the vestibule that's facing the exterior, there's light. So you can see people hanging out in the vestibule or moving back and forth. But once people are in, you close that door, and you certainly could still have, I'm having a hard time understanding what your difficulty is to have performances there, because it's like any other theater, is that's an opaque wall on the interior, and it's a glass wall on the exterior.
With respect, I think it is a little bit different. First of all, you're ending up creating a transparent window or a transparent area simply to create a light blocking device right in back of it. So my question would be, what purpose does that, real purpose does that solve in terms of meeting the ordinance desire for the pedestrian experience looking in? What you're looking in at is a doorway, and I'm not so sure why that accomplishes much, whereas on balance, it detracts from the ability to use the space. It's making us use space for a purpose that has no real relevance.
Well, in fairness, if I'm waiting for an Uber, it's wonderful that if I could see the car pull up, because there's a transparency, I could run out and to do that. I mean, so it actually serves a great purpose.
But it's not being used for that purpose, so
Why wouldn't it?
Are there other questions? I just want to get clarity from, you mentioned something about you had 40% glass there before?
the staff report suggests that there was 40% glass there before. I don't have the ability to tell you that's true.
Okay. You're still going to have windows in the places that are circled?
Yes.
You are.
We're going to have windows in the area that are shown on the plan.
The plan that we're looking at right now?
The second floor will have all the windows that still exist.
Okay. So you won't have windows there.
We will not have windows on the first floor. On the first floor.
Okay. And that's what makes you not be able to meet the 40%.
I'm sorry.
And that is what makes you not be able to meet the 40%.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And I want to follow up on Mr. Hutchins' question to staff. The material in the vestibule and in the, it is opaque?
I don't know, I believe
It's not
opaque.
glass.
It is not glass.
You couldn't be putting glass in there and not putting glass on the front of it.
Correct.
So it's opaque. So help me understand again where all this light is going to be coming in from. I'm perplexed by that.
Comes in from the street.
When? You've got walls all in front of that. The doors are open, but when the performance is going,
To the extent,
doors are closed.
to the extent that they're open, light comes in. To the extent that it's not open, what's the purpose of it?
Oh, so you question the purpose of the pedestrian overlay 40%?
No, the question of the application of it in this particular situation, because it doesn't satisfy any of the policy goals of the ordinance.
Okay, I see. And if it did?
It would be like
and if it
having
did-
fake, it'd be having like fake glass.
So if
or
it
mirror.
did, you'd be okay with it?
I don't know the answer to that.
You don't know the answer to that?
I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that question.
Why is that?
Maybe if you'd repeat it, I'll give it another try.
So if the glass didn't meet its desired goal, you would be okay with having the glass there? I think part of your argument is that there's no purpose to the glass being there, so why should we put it there?
No, I'm saying both, which is having glass there interferes with the use of the property. And to the extent that you accept that it doesn't interfere with the use of the property by virtue of not admitting light, then there's no hardship, if you will, in not allowing the variance to proceed. It doesn't accomplish anything that meets the spirit or the intent of the ordinance.
Okay, Mr. Hutchins?
Thanks, Chair Perry. I want to be clear on the bottom right-hand corner, what's labeled box office. That is all still glazing, correct?
I believe so, yes.
So then that's quite a bit. The entire corner is left as glazing.
Yes.
The doors that lead into the main, called the lowered viewing area floor, those ones leading in, those are a significant amount of glass
That's
doors?
correct.
I can't.
Board Member Hutchins, those doors are constructed of metal. They're steel with small little rectangular lights.
Small little light ones, okay.
There's glass in there.
And then that door to the far left, or not far left, right before the historical drop-off, that door is similar, steel, no light coming through. So the amount of glass on the front essentially is the entire corner, and then that's about it, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions of the applicant? I see none. Thanks for your testimony and answering our questions.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? There's no one else in the room, so just let the record show that no one else is here to speak for or against, and I'll close the public hearing. Board comment? Yes, Mr. Softly?
Thank you, Chair Perry. Well, I appreciate the testimony from staff and the applicant. I am in favor of denying the variance as recommended by staff. While I understand what the applicant is trying to drive at, I don't see the practical difficulty as related to the legal question before us. And, you know, we can certainly come to different conclusions about whether or not the overlay is meeting its intended purpose, you know, with respect to whether or not the request is reasonable. But in my opinion, I think the activation on the street is important to have the additional glass on the frontage, and I think that staff has analyzed it correctly.
Thanks for your comments. Mr. Softly, anyone else? Mr. Hutchins?
Thanks, Chair Perry. I appreciate Mr. Softly's comments. I guess the only thing I would say is the nature of the building, it's a historical building. There's not a lot of uses you can do with an old theater that's kind of designed this way. To make it useful for today's purposes, you're gonna have to redesign some stuff. By putting the staircase in, you're gonna need to, just to get the layout correct. I agree with the applicant when he said that inducing light from the street into the vestibule does not do the spirit intent of the ordinance, is to get eyes on the street so that there's more viewing from the street into the property. I don't think it actually does it whatsoever if you put those glass windows in at all. I think it is detrimental to the use of it as a performance space. Like you said, there's arguably two separate performance spaces, which are separate but not separate because there's no wall, but could be used separately, is what the applicant alluded to. So if you take that second performance space, which would be on the left, the non-historical portion of the building, I would argue you put a window there, it does affect the use of that room. If you're gonna have people coming and going through those doors, you're gonna have light from the street coming in from what would be then the vestibule into the performance space. So I think there's room on finding one for practical difficulty. I think there's, for finding two for reasonability, I think it's totally reasonable to reuse a historical theater as a theater. So I think there's room here, and I'd like to hear some more comments from the board members.
Thanks, Mr. Hutchins, for those comments. Others? Anyone else? Ms. Grants-Korsch?
I'm struggling with this one a lot because, as I said, my example of the previous piece about a theater that I go into, but you are correct that a theater that has an enclosed vestibule also usually doesn't have an exterior wall on the piece. So I am sensitive to the fact that doing historic buildings and also doing art-related buildings are never very financially successful. And as was pointed out, we have an entire perimeter nearly of glass. So I do question the practical difficulty that this presents. And I think to a certain extent, we have to trust a developer who's done pretty amazing stuff at the Armory, and that this really does make sense. While I wish that there was some allusion to where the windows used to be instead of just a flat boarded out, like I wish that there would have been some decorative attempt to try to remind the historic nature of what those windows used to be, as opposed to just flat bricking them off. I am sensitive to the art piece, and so I'm having a hard time with this one because we want to encourage development in that area, and this is a pretty expensive proposition to work on. And if 3 windows are going to sink the project, I don't want that to happen.
All right, thanks for those comments. Anyone else? Mr. Ingram and then Mr. Softly.
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of time in different event spaces, which essentially I think would be the use of that half. And the light is really being blocked by a lot of things on the way in there, that if you're talking about screens and things like that, which I think is generally would be the hardest thing to do in that area, I don't see any reason that you might have to keep those doors shut, and there will be some light potentially from the staircase side, but I do not see that as a way of really preventing that being used as what I would consider an event space, especially during the day. It's also east-facing, which I think is of note for the concerts and things that are likely happening in the evening. So there would be even more limited. Obviously, we have very long summers in Minnesota, so you'll see an 8:30 and 9 p.m. sunset. But I think overall, the amount of light that would be getting in there for the event space portion, which I really think is the relevant portion here, would be not reaching the threshold of practical difficulty.
Thanks for those comments, Mr. Softly.
Yeah, I'll just follow up, and I think maybe directly to Mr. Hutchins and argue that I think the practical difficulty here is the use that's been created, specifically the use of the leasehold property to the west that's now been joined through the party wall. And that is a separate and distinct area from the historical theater. And that does help form my opinion on this question.
Any other comments? Ms. Callahan?
I appreciate appreciate the comments from all of my board members. I think one thing that, I think we've talked a lot about the practical difficulty piece, which I agree with other comments that have been made. I don't know that I see that there is a practical difficulty here in terms of using the space as an event space, especially because there are windows on the historical building that are that are being kept, and there are still the ability to use the event space as an event space and a performance space with those windows that are there on the historical building. So I'm not sure that I see that there, but I also want to comment on the pedestrian overlay, and we're talking a lot about sort of the like eyes on the street and the safety piece, but I also think we need to talk about the pedestrian experience in terms of how pedestrians on the street are experiencing the facades and the sidewalk. And I think that removing the windows from that area has both disrupted the streetscape in terms of there are windows otherwise continuously along Hennepin Avenue, and that also, I think removing the glass, even if there is some sort of, opaqueness to the glass or having the windows there still creates a sense of, it improves the pedestrian experience, and removing it, I think, does contribute to a sense of enclosure in that place.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Callahan. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Hutchins?
Just to beat a dead horse, the space is now becoming one space. So the argument that it's not the historical portion of the building, I would agree, but it's being used in conjunction with it, essentially creating one space. So then it is the same space. And the corner in question that provides a lot of the glazing required has a wall on the plans a few feet in, blocking the light into the performance space. So it's nullifying the light that would be coming into the performance space. We're essentially asking them to build another one on the other side doing the exact same thing. I don't see the practical need for it. It's not achieving what the ordinance is trying to do. I think by revitalizing the space, using it as an anchor in that is actually adhering to the spirit and intent of the ordinance of creating eyes on the street by having something that gets used constantly, in my opinion. I'll leave it alone after that.
Thanks for the comments. Anyone else? I see no one. I would entertain a motion. Mr. Softly.
I move staff findings recommending denial of the application.
There's a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
It's seconded. So it's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Callahan.
Aye.
Grants Korsch.
Nay.
Hutchins.
Nay.
Ingram.
Aye.
Softly.
Aye.
Wang.
Nay.
So it's tied, and I vote yay. I think staff made a very compelling argument that there wasn't a practical difficulty. And I also think that the reasonable use, as Ms. Callahan talked about, it's more than just eyes in the street. It's about that sense of being contained in a tunnel versus being out and open that the glass provides is not being met. So I don't think either of those are met. Staff also touched upon that it was not in the character of the neighborhood, and I don't think it is. So I don't think that finding was met either. So I don't think all three of the findings were met fully. And so I vote yay. And with that, the motion is passed and the request is denied. You can see staff about what your options are going forward. All right. Is there any new business or old business? None. Our next meeting is on May 4th. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
find out when it expires. Or you can visit our website to view.
We'll be presenting the 2023-2025 Minneapolis Vision Zero Action Plan.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks, Chair